Hey, for this project, I went ahead and grabbed a bunch of stuff that I had laying around the house. I first grabbed a ruler so I could use that to measure the stuff I'm about to cut with. Took out an Xacto knife, some PVA glue. In those bottles of tie-dye, empty bottles of tie-dye, I made some shade with some black ink and made a brown shade and a black shade using black and brown ink. I also grabbed some paint that I would need, just black paint, a brown paint, darker brown, golden brown, a blue paint for the building because I wanted the building to pop, dark gray, and then a light gray because I wanted to make a concrete pattern. Also wanted to make sure I got some Mod Podge, some stuff to make graffiti, the brush, some super glue because I definitely need it, some spackle, some wooden sticks, a little bit of flock that I would use later, well, a lot more flock, pliers so I could trim off some wood, a little bit of sand that I had laying around, watered down PVA, and some excess foamboard that I had. So I went ahead and just grabbed the extra foamboard that I had laying around and got some models. I kind of wanted to do a destroyed building or old abandoned building. I figured my poxwalkers would look pretty cool on that. So I just measured some out, trying to figure out where exactly it would be in if it was in the, the real world. If poxwalkers were inside the building. As soon as I figured that out and measured it out, I just started cutting. I went ahead and wanted to make a door frame, so I cut out a little bit of styrofoam on one side so I could make a door. And I used the other sides of the building to kind of match them up. I grabbed a toothpick to make sure they stayed in while I glued it down. If you don't do this, you're gonna have a problem with maintaining the building's shape, because I tried this several times and without the toothpicks it would just fall apart. So as soon as I got the rough outline of my building, I let it dry a little bit, grabbed that extra piece that I cut out for the door, glued it, and kind of slid it in and then pushed it slightly in to kind of make an indent. So this way it looks like the door is actually on the actual foam board, or it's inside the door frame, whatever you want to call it. I glued on the top using another piece of foam board that I had laying around, and then I was done. Just kind of waited for it to dry. Then I put it to the side so I can make some window frames. Figured that'd be cooler than just having a, blank building, because buildings usually have some sort of window. So I used the model again to kind of figure out how big I'd want the window frame. And this is just some chipboard that I had laying around. I don't think I showed it in the beginning, but it's just some spare chipboard. Pretty cheap. I measured everything out and went ahead with the process of cutting it out. Once that was done, I grabbed some super glue and kind of positioned it where I think the window would be inside the building. Then I went ahead and grabbed some spackle. figured this would make a nice concrete pattern on the outside of the building and also on the top. So I just went ahead and grabbed my tool and my spackle and just started pouring a bunch in. A little goes a long way. Surprisingly, I thought I was completely out, but I had enough to actually cover this whole entire building. I also used those pliers later to just snip off the ends of the toothpicks because they kind of got in the way. And you don't want to go for complete coverage. This is an old building. You would assume that it's gotten some sort of grenades or, gunshots on it. Sooner or later that concrete chipped off. So you don't have to worry about covering it completely. A little goes a long way. Went ahead and did that. Once it was dry, I grabbed my Mod Podge and just covered the whole entire thing. This will just make sure that it stays on the building for later. None of it kind of flakes off, because if you try hard enough, if it's just spackle, it'll come off. So you want to do this to make sure it stays on and doesn't chip off later. Boom, we're done. Wait for that to dry. Once it's dry, it's hard as a rock. You might see a little bit of white dots here. That's just, I guess it didn't dry completely, but no big deal. As long as most of it's covered, you're good. So here I started to think about putting a little doorway or like an entrance way where someone would step up. So I guess technically steps. So measured that out, thought it would give it a little bit more life. And then cut that bad boy out. Well, first figured make sure it's straight so it actually fits. Then I cut it out. Kind of measured around where it would be. And then use some Mod Podge to kind of just stick it on. And then cover the foam board with the Mod Podge. Yep, kind of came off a little bit, but I just stuck it back on. I continued with just putting extra Mod Podge over it and waited for it to dry. Once it's nice and dried, figured we were good to go for the next step. Just took it outside and sprayed it with a black primer. Wanted to make sure the paint actually sticks there. I kind of just did a couple of quick coats. Don't mind my very bad glove. I just grabbed a random glove that I left out there and just kind of went ahead and just got started. Then just waited for that to dry. Once that was done, I grabbed some paper towels. I think this is like an off-brand paper towel that we got at Family Dollar. And kind of played around with it, see if I could use it as some sort of siding or something that was on the building before it was destroyed. So I started ripping out some pieces of paper and figuring out the right pattern to place it on. And once I figured that out, kind of got to work with just finding cool shapes and things or ways to put it on there. Dabbed on some more Mod Podge and wet the glue. And just continue with that process throughout the whole entire building. Once the glue hardens, it will actually stay on the building and will give it a lot more texture. So I went ahead and just did that all over the whole entire building to make it look like it got badly beat up. I mean, Nurgle's been here, so you would expect it to be a little beat up. Alright, once that's dry, try to figure out a base size. Kind of wanted it thick enough on some sides where a 32mm can fit there, and then also, I guess, small enough on the other sides where 25mm are gonna be able to go around there. Nice comfortable size, but also some sort of variance. With 9th edition coming up, terrain's gonna be really important, so want to make sure this is good line of sight blocking. So once I figured that out, I ended up measuring out some lines and then cutting it out. Alright, now that's done, I wanted to put a bevel on the side so it would look more natural when you put it on an actual board. So I ended up just kind of placing it at an angle. I just very carefully cutting a bevel. Now it doesn't have to be perfect. In fact, if it's less perfect, it's actually better because any sort of land shape will kind of look more natural if it's not even. So just do your best if you're copying me and do what I did here. Kind of go crazy, but make sure it's beveled enough where it looks like it's actually going into the ground. Alright, once that's done, kind of double check to make sure the building would fit on there properly. Played around with that shape for a little bit. And I ended up flipping it over to the side, the opposite side, and covered it with some Mod Podge just to kind of stiffen up the board so it wouldn't warp too bad. So I did that first and waited for that to dry. Alright, now to the most important part, painting. So I looked at the building and kind of figured out if I do a concrete pattern first, I could paint over the siding later. So grab some lighter gray, kind of just started painting, but realized later that doing too many brush strokes, it doesn't come out that great. So I decided on just stippling at the end. So made it look a lot more like concrete and less like random paint streaks on the building. I ended up hitting the door as well, and also the steps with the same paint. Just doing the first coat. We could always go over it again later if it's, I guess, the black's showing up too much. But kind of liked how it turned out. Didn't do too much touch up except for the top of it later. But just kept stippling on until I finished all around the whole entire base of it. For the top, I used a darker gray. I figured it'd be a little bit more older, maybe more damage to it, but definitely would be grimier, so I went ahead and did that dark paint and painted in the windows black. We're gonna cover these up later to make it look more run down, but just the black Mod Podge is not gonna look that great, so you want to cover that with black. Okay, then I grabbed that blue paint. This blue paint is super bright, which I like, but it wouldn't work that well with this design that I'm working with. Like, I want to make sure this building's run down, not, you know, brand new. Nurgles infested the whole planet, so I'm pretty sure this building would have been pretty badly messed up. So, mixed in some more grays with the blue to get it to the right color that I wanted. And once I got the right color, mixed it up and just kind of did a dry brush. I started going really light. You can go as light as you want, I guess. Later on I kind of got a little heavy-handed, but since we're just starting with the outside of the base or the outside of the building, it's fine. We could always go over it with more paint later. See, right here is where I got a little heavy-handed with that blue, but I fixed it later, so no biggie. That's a good thing about painting terrain and stuff. I mean, if it looks bad, that's kind of the point, right? Then I just waited for that to dry. Accidentally turned off one of the lights, but turns it on later. But now that it's dry, I kind of looked it over and tried to see what else I could add. I noticed that there was some streaking at the top, so I ended up doing another layer of gray paint and kind of touched up some other spots as well. Made sure to get the sides of the concrete top as well. Also hit the door with this concrete color. Ended up using a lighter gray on the steps just to kind of differentiate them, make it pop out a little bit more. And then waited for that to dry. I tried to make a aluminum foil cup for some shade that I'm going to be putting on later now that it's dry. I ended up not working with that because it just kind of soaked through. I didn't cup it right. I just grabbed some more aluminum and kind of made another cup. And then I kind of went nuts. I made sure to use a brown shade. So you don't really want to use your great shades for terrain making. I mean, it's up to you if you have the money for it. By all means, go ahead and do it. But for big projects, I like to just use some homemade shade. So I started off with that brown to make it look nice and grimy. Kind of went crazy with it, but I mean, that's what it's supposed to look like. Grimy, abandoned, you know. As long as it gets that across on the board, that's what I'm aiming for. I kept playing around with the actual base to see where the building would land, trying to make sure that everything's kind of marked off so I don't have any problems later. Then I used a black Mod Podge to just stick it on there and measured it with the bases that I had, or the models that I had. There's a foul blight spawn that I painted up and some poxwalkers. What I was aiming to do with this brown paint was to kind of make a texture paint that's already brown, but I forgot that the blackness of the actual Mod Podge mixed with black paint was way too dark. If I did this again, I'd probably just use regular Mod Podge and brown paint with the sand that I'm taking out right now. So this sand is mixed grains. I used a couple of different sands that I found around. Majority is a Dollar Tree sand that I found. I think also some sand I found at Walmart by the craft section, and then Michael's. Just kind of dumped a bunch in. They're all different sizes, which comes out great when you're making texture paint. So, dipped some brown in there. Didn't really change the color that much, but no biggie. We're just gonna paint that up later. And then use that to kind of go around the whole entire base. Now you want to make sure you plop a bunch on so it's not too even. You know, that's kind of a dead giveaway of it just being super duper, I guess, light or not thick enough, essentially. It's too thin. It's too thin, everything looks flat. When it dries, it's going to look super flat and look really not good. So the thicker the better. And I kind of went ahead and went around the whole entire base, making sure I got the edges as well, so this way it doesn't look like it's exposed foam board on the side or anything. Then I just waited for that to dry. Also put some plaster of Paris on top of it to make sure it's nice and weighed down and flat. Alrighty, once that's done, kind of get started with painting it. Ended up using a couple different browns in this project. Started off with like a darker brown, kind of worked my way up. Here you see I'm trying to use this palette here. Ended up using this, I think it's a chocolate brownish color. There's a golden brown at the end and then a middle brown. You could really use whatever you'd like, but for this type of Nurgle-ish, I guess, terrain that I'm making, not really Nurgle-ish, but I like to imagine Nurgle took over. I would assume that it was a normal planet, maybe a hive city, and a bunch of Death Guard just showed up, wrecking shit. And eventually these people had to leave their little building there. So I went ahead and hit the edges and continued on with just dry brushing. Try to make sure your brush is not too wet or else it'll look a little weird. You could always fix that up later with flock, but you know, be careful. Once that was done, I made a brown wash just using some brown paint and some water out of my cup there that I was using to kind of wet my brush. The reason I was doing this was I wanted to make some wood planks. So I grabbed those wood sticks from the beginning of the video, just kind of snipped them up with those snippers there, and painted them up. So just dipped them in that water to give just a very minor brown stain, I guess. Here's how it came out. Looks pretty decent. Gonna use that to board up the windows and board up the door. I have this red paint pen that I found at Michael's. Decided to draw some graffiti up. Made a little smiley face. A cool thing about these pens is they're pretty, I guess, fluorescent. So it looks pretty cool and looks like a paint can, I guess. Made a little bit of drip marks there, like it's freshly painted. I also went around the building itself and did some more graffiti. I also have this barrel that I made, and the middle of it is a green 2-part epoxy mixed with paint, I think. I want to say I used some sort of green paint. Just kind of super glued that on there. Figured that'd be kind of cool. And then using some wet PVA glue, that's watered down PVA glue, I went around the base of that to get ready for the flocking. I use this darker flock that I found at one of our hobby stores nearby. Don't use it that often, but I thought it meshed well with the Nurgle theme, so I kind of threw some of that down to see how it looked first. Looked pretty decent, so decided to just continue on with that. Now you want to go in kind of patches. At least what I wanted to do was do some patches. I ended up mixing up a lighter stock a lighter flock that I had, and mixed it with that darker flock to kind of give a, I guess, fading gradient of flock. Obviously, some patches of grass would have died, and some of them would. Some of them would overgrow, and some of them might not. But did that and sprayed it down with some watered down PVA. Once that was done, I used this Tamiya weathering powder that I had. I usually used it for some orc vehicles, but it had a soot option, so I thought that would be cool. Show maybe like blast damage, maybe possible fires that were put out, and something like that. All in all, just to kind of grime it up a little bit. Then I went in with some of this black wash, kind of just loaded up this very small brush and let gravity do its job. And I went around the whole entire building with that. Just the tops though. Threw all the boards onto there, and we're pretty much done. Had fun with this project. I hadn't made a building before, so it was kind of interesting on how to do it. Definitely a lot of things I learned along the process, but here's how it came out. If you like what you're seeing, please drop a like, share, or subscribe. I also want some ideas if you guys made it through this whole video. Sorry it was a long one, but if you guys have anything that you want to see, please comment down below and I'll definitely look into it. And if you guys are following what I'm doing here and you guys want to try to make a building for the first time, go for it. It was definitely fun. So you guys have a great day, but most importantly, have fun.